Hey everybody, this is my thoughts on Company of Heroes 2 as of the Steam Free Weekend that just happened, so make sure you check the date of the upload before you start going, ooh, Steam Free Weekend! A couple things to note. I played this during the beta, and that was on my 8800 GT. And that card is pretty much min-spec, so admittedly I wasn't really expecting to max it, but it ran like crap during the beta. And I wasn't really able to figure out why. So I expected, hey, that's going to improve when I get to the full game. No, it didn't. I'm now running an HD 6850, which is over the recommended spec, I might add. I'm running 4 gigs of RAM, which is at the recommended spec. I'm running a processor that's over min spec. It's not quite at recommended spec, but it's over min spec. On low settings, I am struggling to get 25 frames a second. And this isn't even at a high resolution. This is at 1280 by 1024. Struggling to get 25 frames a second. Think about that for a second. Over the recommended spec on my graphics card. Over minimum spec on processor. And at recommended spec on RAM. And yet, it runs like total crap. I don't understand it. I really don't. It doesn't make any sense. And if you're thinking, oh, well, it's just your computer, DW, your computer's getting old. Well, yes, it is. But a friend of mine's isn't. He's running a far, far more powerful system than mine, which is in fact running Titans. And an i7 quad-core. And far more RAM than I've got. So, in theory, he should be able to max this thing and get absolutely stunning performance. Well, he's able to max it, and struggles to get more than 35 frames a second. Think about that for a second. Something is horribly wrong with the programming in this game. I don't know what it is. I don't know what they've screwed up as far as optimizations go, but the performance in Company of Heroes 2 is absolutely horrendous. Across the board. Doesn't matter what system you're running. If you're running something that's higher end, you're going to see better performance. As long as you lower the settings a bit, of course. You're going to be able to play it, obviously. But don't expect to get much more than decent performance out of it. Because if you think about it, with my system and struggling to get 25 frames a second on low graphics, something's wrong here. Particularly considering the game doesn't even look that much better than Company of Heroes 1. And that came out 7 years ago. So there's something really wrong here. And I don't really know what it is. I don't know whether it was the switch to entirely DX1011. I don't know whether it was the switch to Sega. I don't know. But it runs like crap. And that was one of the biggest issues that I had going into this thing. It was hard to get past the performance and actually get anything out of the game. So, was I able to get anything out of the game? Yes and no. See, I had played the multiplayer during the beta, and it seemed incredibly unbalanced, particularly in the map design, where it would blatantly favor one team over the other. And that got extremely annoying. It has also got annoying with that the teams themselves, the Axis and Allies, just weren't really balanced either. The Russians got overwhelming numbers incredibly quickly, and pretty much would just sweep the Axis with incredible ease. Because the Axis don't really get good until later on when they get access to their higher tech stuff. Well, that hasn't changed either. Still the same system. There may have been some slight tweaks here and there, but the Russians still get that overwhelming numbers advantage and pretty much sweep the floor with the Axis very early on, unless, of course, you happen to be really, really good with them, or playing on a team that happens to have Russians. So, right off the bat, the game is biased to one team over the other, and to one faction over the other. And then they throw in the commander system, which is pretty much like the doctrines were in the original Company of Heroes, where you would get different bonuses depending on what you chose. And with this one, you get to select a commander, and they have their own set of abilities. There's a lot of them. Quite a few of them you unlock during play, and then there's a massive number of them that are DLC. Now, I had access to a lot of those during the free weekend, so I don't know whether they just gave us access to those for the free weekend, or whether they actually integrated them into the game, or what. But it seemed very, very unfair to have a lot of these as paid DLCs, considering that they give you outright advantages over people who don't have them. And then, of course, there's some bizarre level-up system that I didn't really pay too much attention to because it didn't really factor into my gameplay at all. It gives you some marginal bonuses here and there, and I didn't level up enough to really get those bonuses, so I didn't really pay too much attention to it. Keep in mind, this is not a review. This is just what I'm going off of for the free weekend. So, the multiplayer still seems pretty borked. I don't know what they did to it to really design it in this way. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but it's just not. As far as the single player goes, the campaign, I was not impressed at all. In fact, I found it a bit insulting. You see, the original Company of Heroes tried to be like Band of Brothers, which, if you haven't read the book or seen the show, great stuff. Company of Heroes 2 tries something else, and it fails miserably in the process. It has you playing through the story of Lieutenant Izakovich and his exploits in the Soviet Army. And he's retelling this stuff because he's in a labor camp after being branded a traitor. So right off the bat, they are really, really pushing the idea of the Russians just being terrible. Now, admittedly, the Russians did do horrible, horrible things during World War II. But it seemed like that was the entire point of the campaign, at least as far as I played into it, which wasn't all that long. I got very tired of it very quickly. And I don't really know what they were going for with it. I can see immediately why Russians were so pissed off about this game and called out for it being banned in their country. I can see that. As for the gameplay of the campaign itself, they borked that up too. It's incredibly scripted. They basically just said, no, we're not going to give you control over it, at least as far as I played into it, which I didn't play too far into it again. Maybe it gets better later on, but at least early on in the game, they just do not give you control over your units very much. And in fact, they give you tons and tons and tons of units to just run around and defeat the enemy with. There's basically no strategy to it at all. Again, as far as I played into the campaign. Just horde tactics, which is not really much tactics at all. It's basically just have a bunch of guys and charge, and you win. So, ultimately, I found that the campaign was a complete waste of my time and didn't bother with it. So what does that leave, basically? Not much. The sad part is, the core of Company of Heroes is still there, and it's still solid. They've still got the cover system, they've still got the unit banter, although it's certainly cut down from the previous game. They still have that variety of units and mixed unit tactics that you're going to be using. And that all blends together well. It's just that the balancing is so broken and that the responsiveness of units seems a bit off. It's kind of weird, actually. And that all coupled with the performance and just everything makes me really not like playing it at all. In fact, I have no desire to actually get the full version of the game and review it. So, the end result of this free weekend informed my purchasing decision. I'm not going to get this game. I'm not going to review it. And now you know why. So, feel free to leave your thoughts on Company of Heroes 2 in the comments. I don't know what they thought they were doing with this thing, but it's just a mess. It leaves me bewildered as to how they could take something as good as Company of Heroes 1 was and wreck it so thoroughly with the sequel. And especially considering the sequel is barely anything more than a standalone expansion pack for the original game. As far as its gameplay and everything goes, it just feels like a standalone expansion pack rather than a full game that they charge $60 for. It's frankly kind of insulting. So, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I apologize if any of you were expecting me to review this and really looking forward to that, but I just don't feel up to it now that I've played this. I really don't. Sorry guys, but thanks for watching.